Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. I'm so glad everyone's here. So we're going to be talking about navigating burnout today. I say entrepreneur, but what I mean is both entrepreneurs and small businesses. So this is kind of for both. So as I say entrepreneur or small business, just know that they're somewhat interchangeable. As I go through this presentation, it just is a lot of writing to say entrepreneurs and business owners or small business owners in every single slide. Before we get started, just a quick introduction. My name is Kristen. Most people know me as Kiki. It just kind of stuck. I'm a leadership coach and consultant. I've been doing that for about 4 years, and I've coached leaders from startups to Fortune 500 companies across multiple organizations. I also run our Small Business Development Center Pitch Prep program. So if any of you are looking for funding and you're interested, a little promotion there, please don't hesitate to reach out to me and let me know, and I'd love to share more information on that. I worked at Airbnb for nearly a decade. I have 15 plus years of learning and development and leadership experience. And I've experienced 3 separate burnouts. They were a combination of both personal and professional. So a lot of times we talk about burnout as it pertains to only professional, but has anyone seen Severance? That show? Yeah, okay, a couple people. Okay, that's not real life, right? So we can't actually separate ourselves, and there's really no such thing as work-life balance. It's more a series of trade-offs. And so burnout really comes up. Sometimes it can be mostly due to work. Sometimes it can be mostly due to personal life and the stressors that you have in your personal life. So we'll talk about this, but just keep in mind that this might not just be your work. You are a total human. And so that includes both your personal life and your professional life. Although sometimes it does feel like maybe it'd be nice to do the whole Severance thing. But if you finish the second season, maybe not. Cliffhanger without adding anything. And then I live in Los Osos. I grew up in Cambria, so I'm a local. I live there with my hubby, my 2 kids, my dog, and we recently got chickens because we needed more to do. And then just a quick disclaimer, I am not a medical professional. I'm not a healthcare professional. Highly recommend if you're feeling like we go through this and you're like, wow, I'm totally burned out. If you don't have a therapist, I have a lot of recommendations, especially for local folks. But I'm not a healthcare professional. A lot of the insights come from my own experiences with burnout, managing other folks with burnout in the corporate workplace, and then also coaching leaders and business owners and entrepreneurs who have had burnout. Feel free to ask questions throughout, by the way. Just make sure you raise your hand so we can toss you over that fun little mic. So I want to start out with a quote because this is kind of a startling statistic, rather. So 72% of entrepreneurs and small business owners report mental health concerns with burnout, anxiety, and chronic stress being among the most common. This is compared to only 48% of non-entrepreneurs. And this is from a study at UC Berkeley. So really what this points out is burnout is not a weakness. It can feel like a weakness when you're in it. You feel like, what's wrong with me? I am broken. You are not broken. It is just a signal, and your body is giving you that signal. And oftentimes we do kind of cut off the communication between our brain and our physical body. And so we may not be noticing the subtle symptoms and signals throughout. So we'll talk about a lot of the signals and symptoms of burnout. So you can start to kind of check in with your physical body and make sure that the two are communicating, your brain and your physical body. There's some specific entrepreneur and small business owner risk factors. So financial pressure being one of them. When you start out a business, you don't have a lot of money, typically. This is why we typically are looking for VCs to fund our businesses. There's a lack of support infrastructure. You're probably doing most everything on your own. Maybe you have a couple people that are helping, but you're definitely not wearing a single hat. You're most likely wearing multiple hats between marketer or salesperson, all these different aspects of your business. There's also constant decision-making, and that decision-making can create decision fatigue after a while, which also contributes to burnout. There's blurry boundaries. So I don't know about anyone else. As a business owner, I feel like it's 3 a.m. I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, oh, I have a great idea for that burnout presentation that I'm giving tomorrow. I should write that down or send myself an email, right? So it's really hard to kind of have those boundaries. You can't just leave work at work like you may be able to when you're working for another company. That's also hard for some people too, so I understand. There can be some isolation. The hothouse is a wonderful place, so hopefully no one feels too isolated. But when you're dealing with your own problems within your business or challenges within your business, it can feel really isolating. And then there's a pressure to appear fine, especially if you may have a couple employees. If you're not fine, everyone else is going to panic, right? And so you have to kind of put on this persona that everything is fine, everything's good, I'm good, even if maybe you're not feeling that great. And we can actually create this persona that like, oh, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And that can create more of that dissonance between our mental thoughts and our physical body. So we're not actually noticing those burnout symptoms. So with all of that, I would just like to take a minute to pause. So this is a really great way to center yourself. It takes just a couple of minutes. So I'm going to take you all through it if you're okay with it. Anyone that's online can follow along. We're just going to go through our 5 senses. So I want you all, if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes. If not, just find something to kind of look away at. And I want you to first just notice your breath. You don't have to change it. So just notice the depth of your breath. And then notice your feet firmly planted on the ground. So if you have your legs crossed, uncrossing your legs, maybe even tapping your toes, just noticing the ground beneath you. And as you take your next deep breath in, notice if you can smell anything. It may be your coffee, maybe it's your cologne or your perfume. And next, we're going to go to taste. So again, could be that coffee that you're drinking. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's the mint you popped right before the session. And next, tune into what you can hear and try to hear the furthest away sound that you can hear. All right. And next, you're going to open your eyes and find a color somewhere in the room. And once you find that color, try to find one more item in the same color. You might have to look around a little bit. There's lots of yellow in here if anyone can't find a color. All right, and lastly, I want everyone to rub your fingertips together. And you're gonna do it with such attention that you're feeling the little tiny ridges on your fingers. Can you feel them? Maybe a little bit? All right, so what we do when we check in with our 5 senses is we're actually grounding ourselves. So quick neurology lesson. So our brains, let's say they look like this. We have our prefrontal cortex, and it overlays on top of our amygdala, which is this nice little almond-shaped thing kind of right in the middle of your brain that's responsible for our stress response and all of our emotions. So when you flip your lid and get upset, your amygdala is exposed, and now your emotional brain is what's online. It's really hard to make decisions. It's really hard to focus. It's really hard to be productive when your amygdala is online. So you can imagine that if you're super stressed out and you're experiencing chronic stress, your amygdala is in the driver's seat. You're probably not going to make the best decisions. You're probably not going to be as productive or engaged as you want to be. And so by checking in with your 5 senses, this is just one way. There's a ton of other tactics that we'll go through, and there's a resource guide, so don't feel like you have to take a ton of notes. There's a resource guide that has even more information than what we'll go through today. But that 5 senses exercise that you just did, even just noticing your breath and feeling your feet on the ground can help you lower your prefrontal cortex. And if you can start to get in the habit of doing this, especially during transitions, it helps your body and your brain transition into the new thing that you're doing. So maybe that's a meeting that you're going into. Maybe once you leave here, you kind of think about as you walk through a door, you take a deep breath and you feel your feet on the ground as you walk through the door, right? These are very, very small things. They seem like they're not going to make a big difference, but if you can create a habit out of them, they will cultivate resilience and help you stay grounded throughout your day. Thanks for doing that with me. I saw everyone close their eyes and like do the thing. I appreciate it. All right, so what to expect today? We're going to explore stress and burnout. So there's one slide in particular that has way too much text on it, but we're going to go through it and make sure that we understand the different definitions between both stress and burnout, and then also resilience. We're going to talk about signs of burnout. The goal here is to identify what are some of these signs. Everyone experiences burnout in a different way. So no single person is going to experience it in the exact same way. So we'll talk about a lot of different types of burnout, and we'll kind of do some specific characteristics of burnout that you typically see, but it's not an all-inclusive list. Then we'll talk about some burnout prevention strategies, so similar to the one that we just did. And then we'll go through key takeaways and questions. Again, feel free to raise your hand throughout. Madison can help us throw the mic around. Okay, so this is the definition slide that I mentioned has way too much text. Please don't take any sort of presentation advice from this slide. So stress is the body's natural response to challenges or demands in life. But not all stress is bad. There are actually two different types of stress. There's eustress and distress. Eustress is actually good stress, and it helps us be productive. It helps us want to get up and go into work today. And so I can tell you today, I was feeling a little nervous before this presentation. That's good stress. That means I care, and it's getting me into the place where I can actually come in and present. It's predictable, it's moderate, and it's controlled. And it motivates us. It supports peak performance, and it also builds resilience. So it's okay to have a little bit of stress as long as it's predictable, moderate, and controlled. Distress is actually the harmful stress. This is the type of stress when you hear all of those statistics around how stress can negatively impact your health. They're talking about distress. So distress is unpredictable, it's more severe, and it's typically more prolonged. So it's not something, I'm going to leave here today going, that felt great. I'm no longer going to be nervous about this presentation. I'm not even nervous now, right? But once I started, that eustress kind of went away, and I'm no longer feeling that dread or that stress that maybe I felt when I first got here. Chronic stress is continuous distress. So chronic stress, you're experiencing this stress over and over and over, and you don't have adequate recovery. Distress is going to happen in our lives. We're going to get to a point where something is causing us kind of this prolonged stress. So it's really, really important, number one, to notice when you're stressed and not just push through it. And then it's also really important to have recovery strategies that you can come back to so that you can lower that level of stress, lower the cortisol in your system, and lower that prefrontal cortex back down. Make sense so far? Okay. Also, this chronic stress, that's where we have the risk of physical, emotional, and mental health issues, including burnout. Burnout is a syndrome that's caused by unmanaged chronic stress. So you don't have adequate recovery practices in play, and you have this chronic stress and it's completely unmanaged. Maybe you don't even really realize that it's there. It's just kind of working in the background, and you're just going to keep going and moving over it. You're not even really paying attention to it, which is also a learned habit, by the way. So if anyone in here is like, oh, wow, I think I might be stressed and I just have been lying to myself all this time, that is totally normal. Please be honest with yourself, but it is totally normal to kind of get into a place where that's a habit. This results in exhaustion, detachment, and decreased effectiveness. And we'll talk about what that means. We'll expand on this in just a minute. And then resilience is the capacity to effectively adapt and recover from stress or adversity, and it's strengthened by healthy stress management and stress recovery practices. Okay, that was a lot of information, but are we fairly aligned on what stress is? We have good stress, we also have bad stress, we have chronic stress, which is ongoing distress without the recovery. We have burnout, which we'll expand on in just a minute. And then we have resilience. The whole goal is to build resilience over time, because we will have adversity in our lives. We will have challenges that pop up. We will have distress in our lives. The more resilience you can build up, the better able you are to handle that stress. Okay. All right, so this is the stress performance curve. You can see performance is on the left-hand side here. Stress is on the bottom. I didn't label it on the performance side, but the bottom is low, the top is high, right? So I want you all to kind of look at this curve and think, where is optimal performance? You can speak up. I'll repeat what you say so folks online can hear. Do we think it's in the yellow? Kind of right up at the top here where we have high performance? Do we think it's maybe over here? What do you think? Orange? Right here? Yep. Anyone else? Green? Anyone else? got some there. Thanks for the brave folks in the back. All right, so optimal performance is actually just left of the center point. And the reason for this is because it's sustainable performance. So can you perform at the very top level where you're performing at 100%, maybe even 110%? Absolutely. But should you be performing there at all times? No. So what happens, and I'll kind of go through all of this. So you can see at the bottom left in the corner where it says inactive or bored. When you have very low stress, you most likely will also have low performance. So think about like a weekend day. Maybe you're even on vacation. You have no responsibilities. You have nothing to do. Maybe you'll stay in bed a little bit longer. Enjoy your tea for a little bit longer. You're not going to hop out of bed, most likely, and go tackle the world, right? Go get that workout in, and you might just be a little slower in your day, right? There's not a lot of stress. Now, remember, there's good stress and there's bad stress. Which one was good stress? Eustress. Which one was bad stress? Thank you. All right, so when we move up here, we have a little bit more stress. We also see that that aligns with performance. So we have some healthy tension. That's that eustress that's helping us perform. When we move up a little bit more, now we have this optimal and sustainable performance. I would say that's probably, I'm putting percentages on this and I am not a statistics nerd, so I probably shouldn't, but this is probably 90%, 85 to 90% of your performance level. So you can go up to 100, but you need to be able to come back down to that sustainable level every so often. You can't continue to sustain at that top level. And we'll talk about why in just a minute. Really, you fall over the edge and you can go into fatigue. Sometimes we might feel fatigue, and that can be a really good signal for us that, ooh, maybe I've been performing at a really high level for a little while, and I need to do some recovery practices to bring my stress a little bit lower, right? Then we have overwhelm and exhaustion, we have threat and anxiety, and then we have breakdown and burnout. So you can kind of see to the left, this is the optimum space. It's even okay to be inactive and bored. I know that our society doesn't tell us that, and we think we need to be productive at all times, but you can go on a walk without listening to a podcast at the same time or having a meeting, right? You can actually be in that inactive bored space, and it can be healthy for you. On the other side is all overload. So this is where our stress becomes too much. And this is a slippery slope, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Okay, so early warning signs of overload start to show up right at that middle point. So again, you can work in that 100% space. It's just not sustainable. So at some point, you'll slip into fatigue. And if you're not paying attention to that and you're continuing to go at the same level, most likely, especially as a business owner, we have to put things into place, right? And that takes a little while. If you're going to hire someone, their first day, they're not productive. You're probably spending more of your time telling them how to do their job than you are even doing the things. So you actually are going to have to do more when you hire someone until they're at the level where they can be productive, right? So we have to kind of think ahead. If we're already feeling fatigue, you got to figure something out because it's a really slippery slope and it's easy to fall into that overwhelm and exhaustion. This is where anger, mood swings, anxiety, maybe difficulty focusing, relationship challenges, any other signs of stress that you feel when you feel super stressed. That's when that starts to happen. And once you get to that point, so right in between overwhelm, exhaustion, and threat and anxiety, it's really hard to claw your way back. It's really easy to kind of fall off that cliff, but it's a really jagged cliff to climb back up. And then at the burnout and breakdown space, you're feeling exhausted, you're feeling empty, you're feeling inadequate, negative, and unable to perform or relate well. So you might see other people around you and you're like, God, how do they do it? I can't do it anymore. That feeling of like, wow, everyone else around me can do it, but I can't. We'll talk about why that is too. Yeah, absolutely.
Ready.
Woo.
Nice toss. Can I ask a question about the previous slide?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, in normal life, people feel angry and there are certain mood swings and anxiety, and you might have a relationship challenge every once in a while. How do you know that there is, how do you know that what you're feeling when you are in that threat anxiety space, it is not the normal life challenges that you might go through?
Great question. So we're looking at patterns more so than anything else. So are you having relationship problems that are persistent and ongoing? And maybe there's a pattern of it where it's not just one thing, it's multiple things. When I was feeling really burned out, my husband really annoyed me. Sorry, babe. So I think he's gonna watch this. But he really, like everything, just how he was breathing annoyed me. And it was all these things, these patterns. That was how I could have, if I knew what burnout was at the time, I could have identified that I was in burnout. Same thing with anger or any other type of challenging emotion. Emotions, just a quick sidebar, we talk about like negative emotions and positive emotions. They're just data. We have all of them. Even if you don't think that you have one of those emotions, you do. You have the capacity to feel it. So it's more the challenging emotions and emotions that make you feel good, right? But at the end of the day, they're just data. And so looking at that data, the same way that you would look at a spreadsheet and look at all of the data, if you see one outlier, you're probably not in burnout. If you're seeing that there's a trend and you're like, wow, I'm angry most of the days out of the week, or I'm having these mood swings many times a week rather than just once every once in a while, right? So you're really looking for patterns and persistent patterns. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions before we keep going? Cool, cool. This is my, woohoo! This is my favorite part about doing SPDC things. We get to throw things around. All right, so burnout is the loss of these three things. So energy, enthusiasm, and effectiveness. And we'll talk about the signs of each one of these. For energy, it's sleep problems. Again, we might have a bad night of sleep. It might be the night before we're doing our pitch to a VC and we're feeling really nervous about it and we don't sleep well. Does that mean you're in burnout? Maybe not. But if you're having persistent sleep patterns, that could be a sign. Trouble getting started. So getting into work and going, oh, what am I doing? Well, I could do that. Well, I don't really want to do that. Well, I could do that. Well, I don't really want to do that. Also, this is really challenging when you are a neurospicy human. I am very neurospicy. I have ADHD. And it can be hard to get started in general, even if you're not in burnout. But it's also more likely for you to experience burnout when you are either on the spectrum or you're neurodiverse. So just noting that for yourself. Again, it comes back to the patterns. What's normal for me and what maybe is outside of that range of normal? Dragging fatigue. So this is really like what this little guy looks like. It's really that feeling of like, oh, I can't even like put my shoulders back and like approach the day, right? You're just really dragging. You feel super fatigued. You're feeling aches and pains. So there's physical symptoms that you might be feeling. Again, those can be really hard to identify if you've cut off or severed the communication between your brain and your body. That happens a lot when we have a habit of just pushing through things. Any moms out there know what that feels like too. And then excessive food, drug, or alcohol use. So again, you're looking at patterns. Was it your best friend's 21st birthday? You had too much alcohol? Okay, that's maybe a one-time thing. Is it more that you're drinking every single night? That can be a sign that you're trying to lower the cortisol levels. Or maybe it's food, something that makes you feel at ease. Whatever that thing is, if you're using it to actually lower your anxiety or your stress, that can be a sign as well. This is a common burnout manifestation in women. So when I said moms, there's a lot that happens here where we just go, 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 and we're not really listening to our physical body. And then we get to a certain point where we just crash and we either get really sick. When I was experiencing burnout, I had chronic bronchitis. And there was no reason for it. I don't have it any longer, but when I was burned out, I was getting bronchitis like every month. Enthusiasm, so you're feeling a little cynical or critical. Now, maybe you are a little cynical, just naturally. Doesn't mean you're in burnout. Again, we're looking at what's normal for you and what's outside of the range of normal. This takes a lot of self-awareness to be able to go, what is normal for me? Am I neurospicy? Do I have trouble focusing just in general? Am I having more trouble focusing right now? Where's that lever and what does that look like for you? Again, this is why these symptoms can look different and burnout can look different among different folks. You're super irritable. So going back to my comment about my husband, poor man was just trying to breathe and live. And I was like, oh, you're so annoying, right? So you start to get really, really irritable with things that maybe wouldn't typically irritate you. You're feeling depressed or anxious. Again, this can be really difficult if you have depression or anxiety in general. So I have both depression and anxiety. So how much of that is normal? How much is not? That was probably not a good indicator for me to identify things with, because that was a somewhat normal thing for me to experience, even outside of burnout. But it did get worse in burnout. You're impatient. So going back to the irritability, very impatient. You want people to do things. You want them to do it right now. So think about how you're treating the people around you. Maybe it's your vendors, maybe it's employees, maybe it's your friends, maybe it's your partner, maybe it's your kids. How irritable are you, and how impatient are you? Are you kind of, and we live in a world where everything is urgent all the time, right? And we have to respond to things right away. So again, this can be really hard to notice, but we're not actually built to respond to everything immediately. We're not built to consume news and media from around the world at all hours of the day. That's just not how we're built. And so some of this could be, our world is in kind of a crazy place right now. And there's a lot going on in our world, and that could really be impacting you in different ways. And for different folks, it's going to look different, right? And so that could also be some distress that's kind of building in your life. And then disengagement with either other people, it could even be with yourself. It could be disengagement with your mission. Why am I even doing this? You know, that kind of feeling of like, well, there's already coaches out there, so why am I trying to be a coach, right? So that was my third burnout after starting my business. That was what was playing in my head, that self-narrative. And this is actually a common burnout manifestation in men. So this one is a little bit more common there. And then effectiveness. So your productivity goes down, your concentration goes down, your memory goes down, your job satisfaction goes down, and you may be feeling imposter syndrome. Does everyone know what imposter syndrome is? Yeah? Okay. No. Yeah, okay. So imposter syndrome is that feeling that I'm not the person that should be up here right now. I'm not a mental health professional, so why am I talking about burnout in front of all of these folks, right? That's the imposter syndrome, not really realizing that your skills, what your skills can produce, and feeling like an imposter in whatever space that you're in. And this can be huge specifically for entrepreneurs, because more than likely, I mean, maybe you owned a food and beverage business and now you're starting a new food and beverage business and you don't really feel as much imposter syndrome. I was not a coach. That was not my goal. That was not my plan. And I kind of fell into coaching. I didn't have a certification. My first client was my certification in many ways. And I did a beta test, got a lot of feedback, and figured out, oh, this is actually really fulfilling for me. And I added some value. So this could be a cool thing to go into. But man, did I feel like an imposter, because that was not my plan. I hadn't gone through all of the typical steps, and I'm a rule follower by nature. So if I haven't checked off all the things that need to happen, then I'm not a real coach. And so that was the narrative that was going through my head. I struggled with imposter syndrome for the first at least year, probably year and a half of my business. And this is especially common in high achievers. All right. So again, I mentioned this before, but burnout manifests differently for everyone. So this is not an all-inclusive list, but it gives you an idea of how it can affect both your energy, your enthusiasm, and your effectiveness. Make sense so far? Okay. And then burnout tends to manifest across 4 specific areas. So your physical body, your emotional body, your behavior, and then also your cognitive functioning. So for physical, it could be constant fatigue. You could be getting sick a lot, so that chronic bronchitis, headaches, muscle pain, insomnia, frequent illness. For emotional, it could be your mood swings. It could be emotional numbness or apathy. Apathy is that concept that you just don't really feel anything. You just kind of are feelingless. Loss of motivation or loss of joy. Behavioral is procrastination, withdrawal, avoidance, or unhealthy coping mechanisms. And then cognitive is trouble focusing, forgetfulness, indecision, and negative self-talk. How many folks in here are aware of their internal narratives? Yeah, love the self-awareness, amazing. Many people are not. So if anyone did not raise their hands, if anyone online is like, what? I have an internal narrative. So I've actually learned recently that some people don't. They don't have a narrative, they like think in pictures or they think in another way, but they don't have like an internal dialogue with themselves. I'm talking to myself all day long, especially in the shower. I'm like having a full-blown conversation, maybe with even different parts of my brain. I'm not schizophrenic, but I've thought that I might be at some points. And so that inner dialogue, if you can start to pay attention, if there is an inner dialogue in there, start to pay attention to what it's saying. Because it may say something and you write it down and you're like, well, that's ridiculous. I don't actually believe that. That's because you aren't your thoughts, right? We can have thoughts and those thoughts can be untrue. If anyone else struggles with anxiety, you know that you can have these intrusive thoughts that aren't actually reality, but they feel really true to your body. So when you have that thought, even if your brain immediately goes, oh, of course I can do this presentation, right? You're still telling your body with that internal narrative, ooh, we should be nervous. So guess what? The next time you come for a presentation, you're going to feel that nervousness again, unless you start shifting that internal narrative. And to shift the internal narrative, it just takes a little bit of slowing down in time. You have to recognize it and you have to replace it, right? So, and usually the replacement is just the opposite of what the thought is. If it's not an unhelpful thought, just figure out what the opposite is and say it out loud in your physical body. And it feels really weird, right? You like say it out loud, I can do this presentation, right? And you're like, I know I can do it. This feels really awkward. But the more you can do that, the more you replace it, the more you're creating new neurological pathways in your brain. And it at first is going to be a little dirt side road and your brain's going to go, no, we're not going to go down that. We're going to go down the well-worn pathway of telling myself I can't do it, right? But if you start building that pathway of I can do it, I have the knowledge, I have the skills to be able to do this. And if I mess up, I get data, I get feedback, I get to learn, right? But if the more that you kind of promote that in your brain, the more you're paving that neurological pathway, the more likely your brain will follow that pathway instead of the well-worn pathway that might not be as helpful. Okay, so I want to pause here real quick. There is a resource guide that there's going to be a little QR code, and I can also send it over to Madison to send out with the email that will go out, the follow-up email. And it has an audit. It looks very similar to this. And it's really just kind of a stress and burnout audit. But this is a really good way to start to build some of that self-awareness and really be honest with yourself. You're not answering to anyone else here. You're just answering to yourself. So asking the question, am I emotionally exhausted most days? So this comes back to the pattern recognition, right? There's going to be days where you're emotionally exhausted, and that's life, right? But if you're finding that it's most days you're feeling emotionally exhausted, that could be a sign of burnout, or that you're starting to fall into that red side of that performance stress performance curve. Are you feeling cynical or disengaged or overwhelmed? And is that a constant thing that you're feeling? Do I struggle to find meaning or motivation in my work? Am I noticing physical changes like headaches or poor sleep? Again, as a pattern. And does taking a break feel more like a setback than a reset? That one like still hits home for me, still working on that one. But that concept that, well, if I'm going to go for a walk and take a break, or if I'm going to go get lunch, I'm going to come back to my desk and I'm just going to get through some emails while I eat my lunch, right? You have to be productive at all times. You can't take that break because it feels like a setback. So if any one of these things is yes, that might be okay. You might not really be falling into burnout quite yet. But if you're noticing that you're answering yes to a lot of these, you are more than likely already in the red zone of burnout. Okay, I want to hear from you all, because this is also something when we talk about burnout and we talk about the fact that it manifests differently in different people, the same thing goes for your recovery. What helps me feel recovered is not necessarily going to help someone else feel recovered. So I'll give you a couple of examples, and then I would love to hear from you all, and I'll repeat them into the mic so folks online can hear. A couple of things for me, if I can just sit with my dog. She's so cute. And or my chickens, oh, and they're little like, also, I don't know if anyone knows this, but if you hear bird sounds, it's actually a signal to like our reptilian brain that you are safe. Because if there's a massive issue in the world, birds are not chirping, they have flown away. So if we hear birds chirping, it's almost a signal that we are safe, right? To that reptilian part of our body, that like old part of our body or brain. So sitting and listening to bird sounds, sitting with my dog, sunflowering in the sun. So like just literally standing and like looking up to the sun. Maybe don't look at it, but like really feeling the warmth on your skin. That's another one that really helps me. Going for a walk without a podcast, without something in my ears, maybe not even without music, but just really being in tune with nature, noticing the birds, noticing the animals, noticing the flowers. So again, tuning in with senses. So those are a few things that help me. Talking to a friend. How great is it in that moment when you're like, oh, I'm so stressed out, and then your girlfriend calls you or guy friend or whatever, and you're like, oh my God, and you can vent to them. And then by the end of the call, you're like, I feel so much better. Talking to a friend, having community. So what about for you all? What helps you feel recovered? What helps you kind of come back to yourself? Yes.
Exercise.
Exercise, absolutely, for sure. I'm working on bringing that one back in. I ruptured my Achilles recently, so I'm slow to exercise again, but yes.
Listening to or playing music.
Listening to or playing music, absolutely. I totally agree with that one. And you can have so many different emotions with music, right? So if you feel angry, listen to some angry music and turn it up and get through that. And then maybe shift it to some bird sounds, you know? Yeah, absolutely.
Cleaning your workspace.
Yes. Cleaning your workspace, cleaning your house, making sure your environment is in a place that makes you feel inspired and makes you feel like you want to be in that space. Absolutely. Anything else? Yes.
Just for that, show something, I would push my chair back, put my feet on the ground, close my eyes, and do like a pretty deep breath in and out, and that gives me a quick reset.
Yes. So 3 breaths in and out, feeling your feet on the ground, maybe even moving away, even if it's just a couple feet from the thing that is frustrating or stressful or annoying or has somehow charged you in some way. Noticing that, not pushing through it, taking yourself out of that space, even if it is just a few feet, noticing your feet on the ground and taking a couple big, deep breaths. Meditation is something that works for a lot of people. Again, neurospicy over here. It's really hard to focus on one thing for that long. I do not meditate for 30 minutes. You can have micro moments of meditation. There's no rules with meditation. So a micro moment of meditation could be standing in the sun. It could be that moment of scooting your chair back and closing your eyes for a minute and just focusing on your breath. When you're in meditation practice, or if you go and do, like a meditation course, what they'll tell you is your mind is going to wander. It just does. It will. Notice it and compassionately bring it back to the breath. And the one thing that you can do, the one thing that really helps me is feeling what it feels like to breathe in and out. Usually when you're breathing in, it's kind of cool in your nose, if you do that with me. And then when you're breathing out, it's a little warmer, right? The air has gone in, it's circled through your lungs, and now as it's coming out, it's a little bit warmer. So if you can think of the sensation, it could also be the rise and fall of your chest or your belly as you're breathing, right? But if you can notice the physical sensation of the breath, it can be much easier to stay focused on the breath. Yeah, those are all great. So taking the time to think about what these things are for you is going to be key. If you don't know how you recover, it's going to be really hard to build those recovery practices in. And the key here is to build these practices in even when you're not experiencing distress or chronic stress. So even on a good day, when you're feeling good, maybe you're feeling great, bringing in some of these practices as habits. So starting your day every day with a sip of your coffee and really noticing how it tastes. For me, it's tea. I can taste my tea in the morning and I'm like, everything in life is going to be okay now that I've had that first sip, right? And you can feel it going down your throat. It's nice and warm. So finding those little moments, those micro moments of grounding, micro moments of meditation, really just micro moments of mindfulness, just coming back to your physical space rather than always being up in your head. Okay, another slide with way too much text, but there's a lot to say. So I'm going to go through these, but please know there's a resource guide here. You can scan it. It has more information on every single one of these practices. It has additional practices in there. There is an audit in there as well that you can utilize to kind of gauge where your stress level is. But we've talked about some of these. So breathing exercises. It doesn't even have to be an actual breathing exercise. The one that I typically use if I'm going to do like an exercise is box breathing. So think of a box, you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold for 4 seconds. You breathe out for 4 seconds, you hold for 4 seconds, right? And it can be really helpful if you use your finger. So even if it's just in the air, right? It's really helpful on like an actual square too. Draw a little square on your piece of paper. No one really needs to know that you're doing it. You don't have to close your eyes. It doesn't even have to be something that anyone else in the room knows that you're doing. Name it to tame it. So this is just identifying when you have an emotion and trying to figure out what's the name of that emotion. A lot of times we use phrases like I'm upset or I'm stressed. But go a little bit deeper. What is really going on? What is that emotion? Why are you feeling that way? And the key is to do this really with a lot of self-compassion. Do it with kindness. A lot of times we can judge ourselves. Well, why am I so stressed out? I shouldn't be stressed out. I've done this before, right? Again, that's that internal dialogue. Noticing that, catching it, and going, oh, honey. The thing that I always like to think of, I have 2 little kids. Maybe you have nieces or nephews. Maybe you don't have any kids in your life. Find a picture of yourself as a small child. And if you're feeling like you are in this burnout space, put that small child on your phone. So it's just on the background of your phone. It's like on the, background. I don't know, wallpaper, that's the word. And anytime you're feeling a certain way or you're feeling like you're really self-critical, look at that picture. Would you talk that way to that small child? You suck. Why would you do this? You can't do this. No way. You're not, it's ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous, but we do it to ourselves all the time. So if you can notice those moments and reframe it, I like to picture myself talking to my kids. I'm not going to talk to my kids in the horrible way that sometimes I talk to myself. So if I'm noticing that, I like to put one hand on my heart, one hand on my belly. Sorry for anyone online if I keep smacking my mic. And I like to just say, oh, honey, it's okay. It's okay to feel this way. We're human. We have emotions. It's data. What's it telling us? And what's the next step forward? What's that 1% that we can do to take care of ourselves? What is it that I need? Do I need food? Do I need a shower? Do I need to talk to a friend? Right? Go back to those recovery practices. And it's really great to have those recovery practices that work for you on a Post-it nearby or I use Notion for everything. It's like my second brain. And so I have a little spot in Notion where I can go in and it's all my recovery practices. Because sometimes when you're feeling so stressed out, you can't even remember what feels good. You're like, I don't even know what I need, right? And so go back to that list and go, oh yeah, a walk in the park sounds really nice. Or gardening and getting my hands in the dirt sounds really good. Even just taking your shoes off and putting your feet on the ground, even if it's not the actual ground, if it's like this ground, it can be super, super grounding. Noticing the temperature. If you have your feet on carpet, it's probably not going to be as cold as if you have your feet on like a shiny ground, right? So again, it's just noticing your physical body. That's really what brings us back. Movement breaks, hydrating and nourishing your body. We all know if we put crap in our bodies, we feel like crap. Our bodies can get used to it, but if you start really nourishing your body and then you have something that you don't normally have, you're not going to feel that great. And so really what it is your body's just getting used to it. It's become a habit to eat, crappy food. Now, everything in moderation. You want to bite a cake, you want to have a slice of cake, have a slice of cake. Maybe just don't have it for every meal. Stress recovery practices could also look like mindful body scans. So just starting either at your toes and noticing as many of your toes as you can, which is really hard. If you all try that real quick, see if you can notice every single one of your toes. Can be kind of difficult, right? Some of them you're like, oh, I think I only have 4 on that foot. Start at the bottom or start at the top, doesn't matter either way. I like to start at the bottom because it allows me to kind of feel like I'm standing taller by the time I get to my head. So noticing your toes, noticing your feet on the ground, noticing your ankles. You can't really feel some of these body parts. So even maybe doing some ankle rolls and then you feel it, right? Noticing your calf muscles, moving up into your thighs, noticing your hips. Are your hips sore? Can you move a little bit? Going all the way up to the tippy top of your head and almost feeling like there's a string pulling you up. So you're sitting a little bit taller or you're standing a little bit taller. I also missed ritual transitions. I just want to come back to that real quick. Our brains don't naturally transition. And because everything happens so fast in our lives, oftentimes we haven't fully transitioned from one thing to the next. And so we're carrying emotions or stress with us. So it's actually, there's a practice in somatic work where you can actually just like wring it out or like shake it out. Is that a Taylor Swift song? If I had a really good presentation, I could have like played that song at that time. But shaking things out before you go into the next thing that you're doing, having some sort of a ritual that you do. It could just be that every time you walk through a doorway, you're noticing your breath. Could be that simple. If you're feeling nervous in a meeting space or in front of other people, if you have a really difficult conversation that you need to have, another good one can just be tapping your toes on the ground. No one needs to know that you're doing it. No one's really going to pay attention to it, especially if you're sitting at a desk. Same thing with bicep squeezes, so bilateral bicep squeezes. Again, I'm being ridiculous and like really showing it. You don't have to, right? You can kind of do that and no one would really know that you're even doing it. And so that can help you ground, come back to your body, and can really help you stay grounded in those conversations that might charge you in some way. Next one down here is digital detox windows. Also working on this one. My phone is typically glued to me, and it's how I know where I'm supposed to be at any given time. But having windows of time where you're not looking at a screen, especially if the majority of your workday, you're looking at a screen. Time in nature, joyful connection, creative outlets. I love to paint. I suck at it, but I really love doing it. So having that time where you don't have to make something beautiful. You're not creating something to sell or something to give away. You're really just sitting down, and it could just be doodling, right, in the corner of your notebook. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be productive to be productive, right? Reframing what productivity looks like. Just the time that you take to play with your creative outlets can ground you and bring you back. Systems and support could look like calendar buffering. So time blocking in your calendar. If you're one of those people that feel like you're just running from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting and you never have time to do your actual work, time buffering or time blocking can be really, really helpful. If you have a difficult conversation coming up, making sure that you don't have another meeting that comes up right after that one. Give yourself 15 minutes to go, even if it's just walking through the office, go refill your water bottle and take a minute to ground yourself before you move into that next thing. Recovery is a deliverable. This is a really fun one. So reframing recovery as productive. There's a really good book called Rest is Resistance. And she runs a program called the Nap Ministry. And her whole book talks about the fact that rest is actually incredibly productive. If we are actually taking care of ourselves and recovering, we are going to be more productive. We will make better decisions. We can remember things better. We are able to be in control of our emotions or manage our emotions better. So we get into less of the potential misunderstandings or emotional conversations that can lead to some turmoil. So if you can reframe that rest is actually productive, it is a deliverable, put it in your calendar as if it's a meeting and adhere to it. Reflective journaling is a big one. I learn a lot about myself with reflective journaling. Things that come up that I'm like, oh, I didn't even know, I didn't know that about myself, right? So recovery practices, that could be a really great prompt. What are the things that make you feel like you can come back to yourself and you feel recovered and rejuvenated? Values check-in. So this is a really big one. Oftentimes we're burned out because we've been working in a space where we aren't actually aligned with our values. So maybe we're not even aware of what our values are. Oftentimes when we hear values, we think of like core values, right? Like what's our mission, our vision, our core values? Great. And you personally also have your own values, your own core values. What are they? What matters to you? In the resource, I believe it links to a core values worksheet that you can go through and you can actually start to identify your own core values. And if you need help with that, don't hesitate to reach out. Or if the link isn't in this specific burnout thing, let me know. And I'm more than happy to share that with you. And then the last one here is coaching, therapy, and peer support. So talk about it. The more we can talk about it and normalize it, the more we can actually support each other in it. Remember, it doesn't mean that you're weak. If you're feeling any of the things that we've talked about, you are not weak, you are not broken. It is just a signal. And we all have different layers and different levels, right? Some people might be really good at recovery and they don't even really know it. It's something that They've built a practice as a child, right? Other people may not be that great at recovery, and so it takes less stress to kind of throw them over the edge of that stress performance curve. So one more reflection prompt. When we create a commitment, especially if we share it with someone, we're oftentimes able to take a step in the right direction. So what we went through today is really just a transfer of knowledge. It's not going to cultivate behavior change. That's on you. So if you want to see a shift, if you want to see a change in your life, think of one small shift that you can make, one small practice that you maybe put into practice from today's presentation that supports your energy, joy, and recovery. Give everyone just a second. I'm going to play with my dog this afternoon. Okay. I urge you to share it with someone, or just write it down on a Post-it, or put it on your calendar as a real event that is going to happen. And then let's just go through some quick takeaways. So burnout is not a personal failure. It doesn't mean you're weak. I think I've talked about that a couple of times now. Recovery is not indulgent. It's actually strategic. You want to be your best self. You want to do your best work. Learn how to recover. You cannot lead well from depletion. So whether you're leading a business or you're leading a business and you're leading others, we lead in a lot of different areas of our lives, in our communities, at home, with our friend groups. If you want to show up as the leader that you want to be, you have to be able to recover. Small, consistent practices restore energy and focus. This is not a big thing. Don't overhaul your life. Don't burn yourself out trying to learn how to recover the best ever, right? Any of those high achievers out there. These are small practices. So pick one thing to practice. And once that becomes more of a habit, pick something else. And just notice how it shifts your energy, how it shifts your experience, how it shifts your decision-making or your productivity. Your well-being is not separate from your business. Again, this is not severance. We do not live in a world where severance is possible. You are a total human. And so the concept of leaving your shit at the door, sorry, I don't know if I can say that. Leaving your stuff at the door, leaving your emotions at the door, it's BS. You are a total human. Does it mean come into work and talk about all of your personal problems with all your coworkers? No. Let's be realistic here. But it does mean that you're going to feel emotions when you're at work. Don't try to suppress them. Just notice them compassionately, maybe jot them down. And then, and it's foundational to your success. That was the other point there. And then resilience isn't about pushing through. It's about returning to yourself with compassion. So oftentimes we think, oh, I'm resilient. I can just keep handling all of these horrible things that are going on, right? Don't push through. Take a pause, find a way to recover that works for you. I'd love to hear from folks if there's any questions or if there's a specific takeaway. Did you learn anything today? Is there a commitment that you want to share? You can throw this mic around a couple more times. Was this helpful? Yeah? Yes. Yeah.
Hypothetically, if you were experiencing burnout and you're like in the orange to red level and you're doing these recovery practices, how long do you give yourself before like needing to make a bigger shift? I've experienced things in life where you're going one direction, you're trying to recover, but like there's a point at which it's like, do you leave? Do you need something different? Do you have any advice for how to identify that?
Okay, I'm going to say one thing that you're not going to like.
Okay.
Or that's not really helpful on the surface. And then I have some other things to say. So the first thing is you actually will know when it's time to leave. You will know when you're at that point internally if you're being really honest with yourself. But it requires slowing down and it requires compassionate and kind self-exploration. You know. Coaches can really help because that's the whole point of coaching. We ask questions so that you can come to your own realizations about what is true for you, because it's going to look different for you than it will for anyone else. That aside, I would also look at patterns. So did you make some small shifts, and are you noticing maybe incremental shifts or positive recovery that's happening overall? Sometimes we can really zoom in, or we can be so zoomed out. So try and look at both of those areas and go, okay, if I zoom out a little bit and look at the forest from the trees, Am I feeling more recovered, or do I still feel like I'm depleted and still in the same spot I was a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a month ago? So looking at kind of the trends, again, this is all data, right? It feels really intense. It doesn't feel like data on the inside of our bodies, but it is just data. So if you can start, there's a lot of really cool templates out there. I have like an energy template, and it sounds a little silly, but going through your day and being like, ooh, that meeting with that person, 0 energy, right? Oh, that meeting with that person, God, I feel so excited after that meeting. I feel inspired, I feel energetic, right? I did this work, admin work for me. Oh my gosh, doing all of my invoicing, 0 energy. So finding ways to put that in the middle of something that gives me energy on either side can be really helpful. So just tracking things and noticing the trend is how you can do it yourself. And then just being really compassionately honest with yourself. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Awesome. Any other questions? Yes.
So there are certain things that kind of just like happen to you in life that are sometimes really shitty. And so I mean, and they might push you into that fatigue, overwhelm, exhaustion area. How do you manage the other parts of your life that you can't really necessarily just like slow down, or those parts of life that happen to you, you can't slow those down either?
Yeah.
You know, do these management tools work with the larger problems as well, or are there other tools that might, lend themselves better to?
I would say all of the tools we talked about will help. I think it's also a question of what can you control. I have made myself crazy watching the news over the past however many months. I'm sure other people can relate. There's a lot of it that I can't control personally, but what can I control? That's the question, right? And so when these things happen to you or happen in your life and you don't have control over them, what do you have control over? Mel Robbins has a book out right now that's called The Let Them Theory. It's called she kind of says, let them, let me, right? And so this concept of the world's crazy and it's chaos. Let them. And let me, how am I going to show up in alignment with my values? So when this shitty thing happens and it kind of gets dropped in your lap, you may not be able to control it, but what can you control? Can you take a walk? Can you call someone and talk about it? Can you seek out a therapist or a coach to have someone to talk about it that maybe has more insight into what you're dealing with, right? So yes, all of those things that we talked about, all of those different strategies will help. But really just the concept of understanding what can I control and what is outside of my control. You can't control other people. You just can't, no matter how much we want to. We can influence, but we can't control them. And so to the question earlier, there may be certain people in your life that you're like, wow, this is not the person that I need to surround myself with. And that can be a really hard decision, but let me create a boundary with this person. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you personally also, like, how do you, because I'm not like diagnosed with ADHD, but everyone that I know that has ADHD says they have ADHD.
Good tall tale sign.
Yeah.
That's basically as good as a diagnosis.
All my friends are ADHD, all my business partners are ADHD. But like, what do you do differently? Because I'm just like looking at some of these things, like I always have trouble focusing. I never get good sleep. Like I'm always impatient. I
Yeah.
think these are things that are just like inherent to that. So how do you notice when it's like not just being ADHD?
Yeah. So first of all, when you are ADHD or you are experiencing ADHD, I don't think that we are our labels, right? Like we don't want to label ourselves just I'm more than my ADHD, right? If you have ADHD, you are more than your ADHD. But it does make us more prone to burnout because of what you said. We already can't sleep well. We already can't focus well. We already have a hard time making decisions because we're like, oh, but context, right? There's so much context. It's hard to see the forest from the trees sometimes. I think the first thing is making small shifts. So when I was diagnosed with ADHD, it was the most empowering diagnosis. It was unlike any other diagnosis I had ever received because it gave me permission to start to go, cannot focus, Google or ChatGPT. because I think I have ADHD, or I was just diagnosed with ADHD, and these are my challenges. Help me create some sort of protocol. I love ChatGPT for this kind of stuff, like personal stuff. I know it's great for business too, but being able to ask, hey, help me create a protocol that will help me get into focus mode, right? Because actually, when we have ADHD, it's two sides of a coin. So on one side, yes, we absolutely have challenges that other people don't experience. On the other side of that coin, we have superpowers. And that doesn't feel great when you're in the midst of the challenge for someone to be like, use your superpower. And you're like, to hell with you, this sucks, right? But it's true. There's two sides of every coin. And so identifying if you have trouble focusing, first of all, a little bit of self-acceptance, like radical self-acceptance of who you are and how you work, how you tick is part of this. But then figuring out what does help you focus. In those moments when you are able to focus, is it your environment? I know for me, if I have a messy environment, I absolutely can't focus. It doesn't matter how much I care about the thing, or I like the thing, or I enjoy the thing, I can't focus. And so finding the things that help you create a space where you are able to focus. Another really good one for ADHD, we have, there's this like part in our brain, olfactory part of our brain, where we can notice smells, right? So one thing that I have on my desk is like it's like an essential oil. It's called like an aura spray. I don't know, but it's a spray, and it's not like perfumey, but I can spray that when I sit down at my desk and I close my eyes and I feel my feet on the ground and I breathe it in. And that's my signal to start to work. And now when I smell that smell, I'm like, oh, I'm focused. What am I getting done? I'm like super productive, and I can tap into hyperactivity. So don't overwhelm yourself. I think it's really easy to overwhelm yourself and go, okay, well, I have sleep problems and I have this and I have that and I have this and I have, find the one that you think will make the biggest difference. Just pick one and then create some practices around it and just get to know yourself around it. So again, it takes a lot of self-compassion, building that self-awareness of what works for you. And then again, noticing the trends. So are you even less focused than you typically are? Are you having more sleep issues than you typically do, right? So just kind of noticing those things. A lot of the practices that we talked about can help with a lot of these things. So that concept of, I spray the spray and I feel my feet on the ground and I take a couple deep breaths before I start my day, that practice just happens. Like I don't have to think about it now, but creating that habit has helped me learn how to focus. So it doesn't really feel like I have as many focus issues, right? Until I'm like deep cleaning the bathroom and I really should be finishing my burnout presentation, sure you can relate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. If you ever want to chat about ADHD, I'm all here for it.
Now that you brought up like the smells things, I remember this like lavender smell I used to like spray on my pillow, and it would just like knock me out.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
So same thing. It can be for anything, right? For me, the other thing, I work from home. And so spraying something, usually it's actually a food smell. I've stopped spraying now, but I used to have a home smell and a work smell because it was really hard for me to turn my work brain off. And then my kids would be really annoying because I was like, but I'm thinking about work things. And they were like, mommy, mommy, mommy. And I was like, shh, And so being able to make that shift, especially when you don't have a commute, you don't have a transition period, can be really, really difficult. So using a spray or a smell, for me now it's food. And so I'm still in my work brain, and I go to the kitchen and I start making dinner. And as soon as I can smell the food, I'm not thinking about work anymore. So you can train your brain. There's the whole concept of neuroplasticity is that we can adjust our brain. We can create new neurological pathways. We can create new habits, but it's just being realistic about it. So not taking everything and trying to do it all at once, that will never work. So picking one thing that you think will make a difference and just playing around with it, creating some habits around it. And once that's working well, pick something else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Woo! This is my favorite part. I love it.
I have two questions kind of. So do you have any advice on like setting boundaries for yourself? Because I feel like sometimes for me personally, it's like if I have a long day at work, sometimes I just like, this might sound weird, but like don't want to talk to anyone.
Yeah.
Like just kind of need some time to just reset. And like how I know you talked about like your personal situation with that, like with your relationships. How do you have any advice on like making sure that doesn't affect your relationships?
Yeah.
So that's my first question. And then second question, like setting boundaries on the weekend, in terms of like work specifically. I'm pretty bad at that and I'm trying to get better at that. But like I enjoy working, but sometimes it's like if I'm bored or like don't have anything to do, am not productive, I feel like it feels like a setback.
Yeah.
Do you have
Yeah.
any advice on, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that totally makes sense. Doesn't sound weird at all. Going back to your first question, I love big headphones. I mean, those little Apple earbuds are great. They're really great at noise canceling. They're tiny. They're easy to carry with you. But if you have big old headphones on, it's much less likely that someone's going to be like, "Hey, Jill, what's up?" And so I love those big headphones for that same reason. So I'll start with the first question. So setting boundaries and not allowing them to impact your relationships in a negative way, whether it's work relationships or personal relationships, right?
Yeah.
So I think first and foremost, knowing what the boundary is and why do you need that boundary. I have a really busy day at work today, and so I can't focus on anything else. I really need to have a productive day today. So I'm not going to be able to have kind of those water cooler conversations. I really need to do some head down work. So I'm actually going to work from home today, right? That would be a great way to put up that boundary. What I just did there was I shared my intention. I shared the why behind it, right? So we talk about that all the time when you build a business. You always got to tell people your why, right? That's what hooks people. Same thing with relationships. So if you have to set up a boundary, tell them why, right? Tell them what your intention is with setting that boundary. I want to make sure that I can get out today by a reasonable time and not have to work all weekend, but I have so much I need to focus on today. So I'm going to be kind of offline. I'm not going to be on Slack. I'm not going to be answering my emails. If it's urgent and you absolutely need me, you can text me, but just know that I might be a little slow to respond because if it's not actually urgent, I have an urgent day today and I got to get through everything, right? So it's just kind of sharing the why, sharing the intention behind it. That goes for any difficult conversation, by the way, too. Boundary setting is a difficult conversation or can be. And then for the weekends, let's see, I'm trying to think of how I shifted mine because man, that was a hard one. Nights and weekends were really hard for me, especially working from home. It just kind of one bled into the other. And I think number one, it's really your intention. So if you're, don't get me wrong, I still think about work in the evenings. I still think about work on the weekends. It's getting better. I don't think about it as much. But the first boundary I did was I'm not allowed to open my computer. So I'm not going to sit down and look at my computer. If I need to research something, I need to get something from Amazon, or I need to, I don't know, figure out how to care for my chickens or something, I'm not going to do it on my computer, right? So I'm only going to use this little device. Because if I open my computer, it's all done. I get on and I'm just looking up a chicken thing and all of a sudden I'm stuck in my emails, right? So having something that can help you, like what's that boundary that will help you not fall into work mode? You're still going to think about it. It's going to take time to get to that point where you're not actually thinking about it all the time. I have a notebook that's like it sits on my bedside table. And if I'm thinking about things on the weekend or in the evening, I can just write it down in that notebook. Same thing with my Notion. I now have Notion on my phone. So I can write a note on my Notion. I can put it as an action item so that on Monday morning when I go into my Notion page, I can see all my action items and go, oh yeah, that was that thing that I remembered that I have to do, right? Especially with ADHD, because man, those things pop up out of nowhere. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I was just going to comment on that too, because I worked a lot on setting boundaries with Kiki as my personal coach. And it's very difficult, especially if you're a high achiever and want to, be responsive to your clients. And one of the things that helped me was turning off my notifications for my email. So I didn't have that little, 1 to 50, emails on my phone or the dings coming up. If you use Slack, you can pause your notifications nights and weekends, certain times of day. That's very helpful. And then, thinking about when Kiki talked about the rest, it is actually crucial for, especially if you don't want to get into that burnout phase, you need to give yourself downtime. And I had to learn that the hard way, being in severe burnout. And now that I know that I take time for myself, I'm much more productive in general. And I do the same thing. I think about work all the time, but I tend, once I get home, to try not to open my computer. I do still sometimes check emails in the evening, but I will write things down, or I'll send myself a message with my thoughts. So that way I'm not tendency to, oh, if I open my laptop, I'm going to spend 2 hours doing more work. So just some ways to, enforce that. But and another tool that I recently started using is called Reclaim, and it links with your calendar, and it will, you can put what kind of habits you want around your calendar. It will add buffer time around meetings to decompress after. It will add in focus periods that blocks your calendar so you don't have so many meetings. And so it's really helped. My calendar since I started here has been overwhelming, and I didn't want to get into that place, that bad place again. I didn't want to get into the red. So now that I'm self-aware, I've been using that, and it's really helped have that buffer time, or it puts focus time where I actually work on things that I need to work on. So my calendar is not full of meetings. And it's free. There are paid versions if you want more of the features, but the free version's working just great for me. So it's called reclaim.ai, I think. So something to try.
Amazing. You made me think of one other thing. I put a footer on my email, and it says something along the lines of, I believe in intentionality versus urgency, and therefore you can expect that I could take up to 72 hours to respond to your email, unless you're a client, in which case I try to respond in 24 hours. And I put it on there, to be honest, just as like, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. And I saw someone else had an email, and I was like, well, I like that. And I put it on. It worked wonders. I think I gave myself permission to not have to respond to everything so urgently. And then something else, the putting time on your calendar for your emails can be really, really helpful. I don't know if you've ever been in that place where you're in your email inbox and you read something and then you mark it as unread, and then you're going through and you read the same one over again and you mark it unread again, and then maybe you even do it a third time. That's always a sign to me that I'm not actually being productive in my email. And so oftentimes if we're in our email throughout the day, all day long, we're not actually that productive in it. And so being able to set specific time frames, blocks of like, this is my email time, and I'm actually going to respond to things as I go through them, not just mark them as unread and do them later, right? Which is a tendency if you're looking at it all through the day. Yeah. I love reclaim.ai. I'm going to have to look that up. That's cool.
So Kiki,
Yeah.
thank you. This is really helpful.
Good.
But my business is suffering from fatigue. Is there another workshop we can do where we can learn how to refresh, reinvigorate our business? Because I've been in business for 10 years and I'm just circling the drain of my business, and I need to stop it and refresh it. So do you have something like that?
I don't, but I'd love to create it. I think on the surface, I think being able to have the space to step outside of your business. We all work in our business, right? We have to work in it, but working on it is not always something we prioritize. I know that for myself, I'd way rather work in my business because I'm getting constant feedback. I'm working with people. It's great. Working on my business feels really big and kind of scary sometimes. I don't have the answers. If you're doing strategy work and you have ADHD, you're not getting the dopamine hit of like, checked that box, It's like, you don't go strategy work, I did it, it's just ongoing. But really having that time, I have a business coach. I think every good coach needs their own coach. And so my business coach is the one who helps me kind of sequester that time and helps me use it as best as I can. And really what we do, we actually just did it last week in San Francisco, so it's fresh in my mind. The first thing that we'll do is kind of like a business audit. What's working well? What's not working well? And then taking those things that aren't working well and going, is there something here that I need to slash to make more time for something else? Once we did the what's working well, what's not working well, then we started to do the fun part, which was like the brainstorming and the strategy work. So once I started realizing, this thing over here, it's not really bringing me joy. Maybe it's bringing in a little bit of money, but like the real things to slash are the things that aren't bringing you joy and are also not actually bringing in business. You're maybe doing it because you think you should do it as a business owner. Don't should yourself. So take a step back and kind of do a little audit in your business, and then look at those things that aren't working well and start to identify if there's different ways or out of the box ways that you might be able to adjust that. A coach can really help with that, because oftentimes, you know, we're in our own little business forest, and it can be really, really hard to see the forest from the trees. And so to be able to have someone else that's an outside perspective, I think that's probably the most valuable thing as a coach. There's so many moments where I'm talking to someone and I say something that seems totally like common sense, and they're like, oh, I never thought of that before. And I'm like, oh, I guess cool. But it's just because, it's not because I'm smarter. It's not because I have more experience than this person. I've worked with so many incredible people that I think are much smarter than I am. And I've been able to have those moments simply because I'm outside of their forest and I can see their forest from the trees. I'm not in their business, right? I don't have emotion or ego or any of that about their business. And so finding, even if it's not a coach, even just finding someone who knows you and knows your business a little bit, just at a surface level, and then being able to have a conversation with them and go, hey, you know, I've noticed that these things aren't working in my business, and I'd love to have a chat with you and see if we can brainstorm other ways of approaching these parts of the business.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I do a jam session, by the way. I don't normally market in front of this many people. Sales and marketing is not my favorite thing, but I do a jam session. I think a lot of coaches have something called a jam session, and it's really like an intensive strategy session. So you go in, you say, these are the challenges in my business. This is my goal or my vision of where I want to be. This is the time frame I want to be there by. And then I will create kind of a customized set of questions that we go through, and we actually do that brainstorm together. And then by the end of it, you have like a 30, 60, 90-day plan to get yourself started towards that vision or that goal.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions?
I have a question about, I thought it was interesting you brought up decision fatigue, I think you called it. Because like sometimes now that I'm thinking about it, like there could be days where I'm having to make like hundreds to even thousands of decisions, even if it's like little things like emailing or like setting up a meeting with somebody. I know how you kind of correlated some different techniques with like different feelings. What, in your experience or in your clients' experience, what is the best, or what are some ways to combat that, would you say?
Great question. So I like using a prioritization matrix
Okay.
and figuring out kind of what are the decisions that I need to be making and what are decisions that maybe I can have AI make. AI can be a really amazing tool, and to be able to kind of push a bunch of things into it. One of the things that I use AI for all the time is emailing, because I know what I want to say, but I don't want to formulate it in a super professional way or do it in this way or what. I don't want to go through the motions of like, hi, Joe, hope you're doing well, blah, 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 blah. You know, like I just want to write a nice email, checking in with a past client, seeing how they're doing in their business, and letting them know that I thought of them because I saw this article. AI, if you use AI regularly, it knows your voice. And so oftentimes it'll give me an email that I can basically copy paste. I usually make some changes because I don't want people thinking that I'm just using AI and I'm not actually being intentional with the content. But yeah, figuring out kind of what are those decisions that only you can make, figuring out the decisions that maybe AI can make, or even maybe that aren't necessary for you to make that day. If you know that you have a big day with a lot of decisions you're going to be making, more than likely there's some decisions in there that can be pushed to another day. The other thing that I would say is, there's a word for it and I can't think of it, but it's basically putting all the same things into the same time frame, right? So I've had clients in the past that they're like, I just don't have any time. I have no time. I'm constantly decision fatigued. And so getting their calendar to a place where all of their one-on-ones or most of their one-on-ones are happening on a certain day. Instead of having a one-on-one and then having 30 minutes and then having another one-on-one and then having an hour and then having a meeting that you have to go to and then having 20 minutes and then having to go do this, right? That is actually causing the decision fatigue is going to be worse because you aren't transitioning well. You're having to transition from one-on-one to group meeting to strategy work to your email back to a one-on-one, right? So you're actually loading your brain with more decisions that it has to make because of those transitions. So if you can block things out, similar things together, then you're going to have bigger blocks in your calendar that you can utilize instead of having 30 minutes there, 15 minutes there, because that's also part of the decision fatigue. It's like, okay, I have 15 minutes. What can I do in 15 minutes so that I don't have more on my to-do list, right? Because our to-do list just keeps growing. There's no such thing as getting to a place, it feels like there is, right? But there's no such thing as getting to a place where everything is totally done, right? Especially if you own your own business. It's just, I mean, I've never gotten there. Maybe there is a point in, years down the line, but on a day-to-day basis, there's always going to be more to do.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions, comments, commitments? Anyone going to make a change? Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna make a change.
Yeah.
It's like,
Do you want to
this was awesome. Thank you.
tell us about the change you're going to make? If you say your
I-
commitment out loud, you're more
I'm
likely to
gonna-
go through.
Try to utilize all those practices. My coworker and I think we're both at a great point for this spoke to both I don't know, I haven't got to talk to you yet, but how about, I love the emotion, the data is data. What about the emotion to survive, succeed, and find more food every day while doing all the things that we do, the action items that are in, what do you do with that emotion? Or
Yeah.
any specific, I guess these are our tools, but
Yeah.
that particular emotion is just data, but I don't know, that seems like that is a big one.
Yeah.
Anything specific to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's utilizing the things that work for you to release that emotion. So remember I was talking about the shaking it out? That can actually be a really good tool to move through emotion. So if you're finding like, I'm anxious about this thing, and you're like, logically, there's no need for me to be anxious about this, but your body is like, there is a bear and you are gonna die, right? And you're like, but no, there's really no bear. And your body's like, no, but there is. Finding something to allow you to process that emotion and allow it to move through, because we can have this dissonance between our brain and our body. And so finding practices that reconnect those things, that's why the shaking it out actually works. You can even go a step further and visualize whatever the emotion is. You kind of have it on your hands and you're literally like shaking it off of your hands. I know it sounds silly. Do it in the bathroom, do it at home, wherever you need to go and do it. But like having some sort of a practice, working out is actually a really, really good one. Oftentimes we don't really want to go work out, but if you just are like, oh, I'm going to spend 5 minutes on the treadmill, and if I want to leave after that, I'll leave. You're probably not just going to spend 5 minutes on the treadmill. You'll probably spend more time, but actually moving your body in that way can help us process emotions and can help kind of remove that gap or that dissonance between our brain and our bodies. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all so much for coming and engaging. It was great.